Did you bully my child? You look quite delicious." I was startled awake, jolting upright in my chair, realizing I'd simply fallen asleep at my desk. As usual, sunlight streamed in through the window, illuminating the nameplate on my desk. Lini, my partner, Ash, knocked and entered, noticing my pained expression. "Nightmare again?" he asked. I rubbed my eyes. "You know why I moved thousands of miles away from home, to this big city, to this line of work. I'm a commissioned investigator. You can think of me as a private detective. My childhood, in a bizarre family forest. Trust me, you wouldn't want to know what lurked there. After my brother died, I swore to escape. As an adult, I did. I completely changed my identity, came to New Orleans, and here I am." Suddenly, the sound of an engine cut through my thoughts. I pulled down the blinds and looked out. A very luxurious car. Well, I don't really know much about cars, so I don't want to imply it was a specific model had stopped in front of our office. Ash was immediately excited. "That's a custom Phantom," he exclaimed. I didn't understand what he was saying. Phantom. Custom. But I saw a similarly elegantly dressed young woman emerge from the back seat and walk directly towards our front door. I quickly straightened my clothes and went out to greet her. Her face looked familiar. Despite her fine attire, her demeanor was not at all haughty. Instead, she was polite and respectful. After she sat on the sofa, Ash immediately asked, "What can we do for you, Miss Beaumont?" Beaumont. That's why her face seemed familiar. Anyone who read the city news knew the Beaumontes were the most prominent family in our city, and this woman was undoubtedly the new head of the Beaumont family, Mrs. Mathis, because, just recently, my mother passed away, the woman said, voicing my thoughts. "I'm sure you know." I nodded subconsciously, prompting her to continue. "But her body has disappeared." Her statement surprised me, not only because we didn't know about it, but also because she was so direct and calm. She took a piece of paper from her pocket and spread it out for us. "Mosa, this is a scan of her will. There's a major problem we can't solve." I carefully reviewed it. Aside from the large sum of money, I didn't see anything strange, until Mrs. Mathis spoke again. "Look at the first line. It clearly states that all real estate is to be given to the eldest daughter, Margot Beaumont. But my sister, she's missing." Ash immediately asked, "I didn't know you had a sister. Did she have some issue with the inheritance and run away?" She shook her head. "No, Margot disappeared 25 years ago. We spent the morning clarifying the situation 25 years ago. Margot Beaumont, the pampered but eccentric eldest daughter, disappeared without a trace after running away from home. The only evidence left was old, blurry photos from her youth and a letter found in her former bedroom that read, 'Leave tonight. Escape the golden cage.' For all these years, the family had treated Margot as a runaway, searching for her relentlessly without success. Even stranger, Mrs. Beaumont had consistently opposed and obstructed the search for her eldest daughter, yet inexplicably left a substantial portion of her estate to her in her will. And the day after the will was written and she passed away, her body vanished from her bedroom. I hear you're the best investigator for this kind of case." Mathis extended her hand to me. "So I want to entrust you with finding two people, my missing mother and my missing sister. Can you do that?" I couldn't resist the temptation of the Beaumont fortune, and with her plea, I impulsively shook her hand. "Leave it to us." Only after she left did I begin to fret, finding a vanished corpse and a woman who vanished half a lifetime ago. I've really gotten myself into a mess. But since I'd already agreed, Ash and I began planning our division of labor. He would search the Beaumont house for the missing body, and I would investigate Margot. After all, as Ash put it, Margot and I might both be people who escaped our past lives and started anew. I might be better at guessing where she went. After Ash left that afternoon, I focused on investigating the old, faded photos. Margot was barely 18 when she left. Trying to find clues based on these unclear photos from her youth was challenging. I tried to find any young men close to her, I'm sure. I'm sure the Beaumonts had tried this. But Mrs. Beaumont stopped them. The irony struck me. Her daughter ran off for love, then pretended not to care or look for her. And then, upon her death, mentioned her daughter's name and her will escape the golden cage. This pressure is too much. Indeed, I muttered to myself, but then suddenly realized something. Wait, is Alex's full name necessarily Alexander? I picked up the first photo again, realizing I'd missed too many details in the past 2 hours. Sure enough, there was a woman who, although never close to Margot, wore the same style of ring on her ring finger as Margot. Their rings didn't appear in the same photos, as if to avoid suspicion, but she didn't escape my investigation. I was right. Alex's full name in the letter was a female name, not Alexander, but Alexandra, thanks to the enduring popularity of the bar Margot frequented. I found the membership roster from all those years ago. The Alex from 25 years ago did exist, and she never returned to the bar after Margot disappeared. I followed the trail and found her current address. Thankfully, she hadn't moved from New Orleans. After a 2 or 3 hour drive, I found her neighborhood and parked on the lawn in front of her house. The sun was setting, and a woman in an apron was holding her pet dog at the door, seemingly waiting for someone. I got out of the car and walked toward her. "Hello, are you Ms. Alexandra Dyson?" She was startled. "Madame, I told you I don't want to buy nutritional supplements." I looked down at my still formal attire and quickly explained, "No, I'm an investigator. The Beaumonts sent me." "That old hag still isn't giving up," she said abruptly. I thought for a moment, old hag, she must be referring to Mrs. Beaumont. I replied, "I think the person you're referring to died of a stroke 2 weeks ago." Alexandra seemed to relax, bringing her dog back inside and opening the door. "Come in." Alexandra's house was large, and all the tableware, shoe racks, and other furnishings indicated it housed more than one person. Her initial animosity seemed to have changed to warm hospitality. We had a small meal and some drinks, and I finally got to the point. "Ms. Dyson, you and Margot Beaumont once had a significant relationship, didn't you?" She seemed to know exactly what I was going to ask. She smiled calmly. "If I said no, would you believe me?" "You came here." She finished her lemonade and continued. "We met at a bar. From the moment I saw her, I felt something wasn't right. Later, she told me she felt the same way. Yes, we really clicked. We had the same interests, both liked strange, mysterious things, and we completely accepted each other's flaws. So, less than 2 months after we met, we fell in love." Her face was full of happiness. She took out an old photograph hidden deep in a bookcase. It was a picture of them together, Margot smiling wryly as she hugged Alexandra. Suddenly, her tone became fierce. "But that old hag, she did everything she could to stop us. That crazy woman. Is she gone?" She deserved it. Seeing her so angry, I started to guess what happened between her and Mrs. Beaumont. To comfort her, I quickly said, "But she didn't stop you from running away, did she?" That was a vow she made herself. She said that if we had the ability to run away ourselves, she wouldn't tell anyone. She wouldn't come after us. She wouldn't even after she died. No wonder Mrs. Beaumont had been obstructing the family's search for Margot. With the truth laid bare, I asked my final question. "Ms. Dyson, there's a dispute over the Beaumont inheritance now. An old grudge, it seems. Could you please get Margot to come forward?" Before I could finish, a child's laughter came from the front door, followed by a middle-aged man carrying a child. "Alex, we have guests." My head buzzed. I saw Alexandra give a strange smile. "What's this?" "Detective, It seems you missed something. Margot didn't leave with me that night. Back in my car, I stared blankly at the photograph Alexandra had given me. So she didn't run away. Then why did she leave the Beaumont house? I immediately called Ash, asking about his progress and seeking his help. Unexpectedly, he answered in a drunken slur. What's wrong, Lainey? Hey, did you find Maria? I angrily retorted. What's going on with you? I'm working here, and you're drinking. And you got the missing person's name wrong. It's Margot, not Maria. You know? The other end of the phone remained unrepentant. Oh, I went to the old lady's mansion this afternoon, and the housekeeper said they were renovating and wouldn't let me in, and said to go investigate the winery first. So you investigated so much you ended up like this. I slapped my head, regretting that I hadn't let him investigate Margot and gone to the winery myself. I had to push the conversation forward. Listen to me. Margot did indeed have a partner that Mrs. Beaumont strongly opposed. Amazing. You found that out. Ash mumbled again. I continued, but they didn't run away. Understand? I don't understand. Where else could Margot have gone? There was no response. Ash? I asked again. I heard the faint rustling of something being dragged, followed by the sound of someone lifting a phone. Ash, give me some advice. Where do you think she would escape to? Then, a voice I'd never heard before came from the other end of the phone. Escape where? Couldn't I just not have left? I was startled by the sudden voice, and the other side hung up. It definitely wasn't Ash, nor Mrs. Mathis. But who? I slammed the accelerator and rushed back, repeatedly calling Ash. But for over an hour there was no answer. A very strange premonition grew in my heart. But that person was right. When you encounter something you once detested, you don't necessarily choose to escape like I did. You can also risk confronting it. Like my older sister, Fiona, after our childhood experiences, she still chose to stay in the forest where we grew up. But I don't think this bold confrontation is courage. It's often incomprehensible madness. I arrived at Mrs. Beaumont's mansion nearing midnight. Unexpectedly, as soon as my car approached the security gate, the intercom sounded. Ms. Ash, her partner says to let her in. The gate opened for me. I drove straight into the vast estate. I heard that before her death, Mrs. Beaumont lived with 2 doctors, a housekeeper, and several servants in such a large place, without a key, and didn't even see her children. Didn't she find it boring? I slowly stopped in front of the huge granite mansion. Surprisingly, Ash was standing there unharmed, waiting for me. I was standing by the side, and Mrs. Mathis, the servant, ushered me out of the car. I rushed to Ash, grabbing him. What happened earlier? He nonchalantly replied. What? I fell asleep. That's all? You slept for hours. I'm still mad. Why didn't you answer my calls? I couldn't tell if he was pretending. He lowered his head, pulling out his phone. Did you call me? I don't know. At this moment, Mrs. Mathis slowly walked over. You too. Can we move the investigation forward? Didn't you say to come whenever I was free? I was bewildered and instinctively raised my hand. Oh, I called, after the housekeeper pulled me out at noon. I was looking for you. He said the house was under renovation and wouldn't let me in. He wouldn't allow it if the mistress wasn't there. That guy. Mrs. Mathis frowned. After working here for so many years, he still doesn't understand the rules. Where is he? Ash looked around. Miss Megan? I haven't seen her since I woke up from the winery. Hey, let's forget about it and go inside. Go inside. Mrs. Mathis and I didn't argue, and we went into the huge mansion hall. Surprisingly, the interior of the mansion was very simple, completely different from the opulent decor I had imagined. Maybe it was because it was under renovation. Thinking this, I asked Mrs. Mathis as we walked, "What was your mother renovating?" "I don't know either. My mother and sister used to live here, but after my sister disappeared, she became very abnormal. She started repeatedly inviting groups of people to renovate the house, and each group couldn't stay for more than a month, as if she deliberately didn't want them to know what the overall style would be." At that moment, the motion sensor lights in the mansion suddenly turned on, and a huge portrait of an elderly woman appeared on the wall in front of us. It was a picture of Mrs. Beaumont, wearing sunglasses and a sun veil, exactly the same as the news photos we usually saw in the city news. Another strange thing about her: after her sister disappeared, she started covering her face with various things. Honestly, until her death, we children rarely saw her face. At first, she said she was afraid we'd see her swollen face from crying, but she wore that veil and sunglasses for more than 20 years. Ash clearly wasn't interested and went straight to the renovation area. While I squinted at the portrait, it was strange, not just in the way Mrs. Mathis described it, but stranger still, I could vaguely see that under Mrs. Beaumont's veil, she wasn't crying, but smiling, and this smile seemed familiar. "Where's Mrs. Beaumont's room?" I asked. Then Mrs. Mathis led us upstairs. If the first floor's hall and corridor were only slightly modified, the second floor's bedroom area was almost completely renovated. Almost no wall was intact. I was curious how the servants had the patience to live with this eccentric old woman for so many years. Ash and I started to examine the room inch by inch: walls, floors, furniture. We tapped and knocked until we moved the heavy bed and knocked on the old wall behind it. A wall that had never been touched. The echoing sound was clearly not simple. The space behind it must be hollow. Mrs. Mathis and I were both startled. Neither of us expected that the problem wasn't in the renovated areas but in the untouched ones. The old wallpaper was sufficiently dilapidated, and with a little force, I tore it away, revealing a dark, dusty passage behind the rotten strips of cloth. "What's going on?" Mrs. Mathis almost dropped her jaw, stepping back several steps. I pulled out a flashlight from my pocket and shone it inside. The moment the light illuminated the passage, a fleshy, humanoid figure hunched over flashed past. Mrs. Mathis jumped again, and I was also startled. Turning to her, I said, "I guess there's someone else living here with your mother." I walked in front, holding the flashlight, Mrs. Mathis in the middle, and Ash in the rear. The three of us cautiously entered the passage. Unexpectedly, this secret passage was so long, and the further we went, the more tableware, mattresses, and tattered clothes we saw, all emanating a disgusting stench. Suddenly, a quick footstep came from the left passage, like someone barefoot running quickly. I quickly turned the flashlight, finding more passages. On the ground of one path, there was a blurry, shriveled human figure. MSLINE. "Is that a body?" I didn't answer Mrs. Mathis, carefully walking forward, but it wasn't so much a corpse as a human skin. The skin, complete with hair, lay deflated on the ground. When I saw the face of the skin, I gasped. It was Mrs. Beaumont's face. Mrs. Mathis screamed, seemingly scaring whatever had been running, which also cried out, and judging by the sound, it was near us on the right. I quickly turned the flashlight, but in the darkness, I felt something grab my hand. The flashlight beam hit the ceiling. The thing pressed close, trembling slightly. Please. I mean no harm. I just want to live." I was first surprised, then puzzled. Slowly lowering the flashlight, I asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Megan. I was locked up by the old lady. I don't know how I ended up here." Mrs. Mathis seemed suddenly curious, leaning closer to Megan. "What are you saying? Are you Megan, the housekeeper? You were locked up?" I could feel her nod in the darkness. A faint But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw what was in front of me, a fleshy, hairless, blood-red person, covered in viscous fluid, with exposed muscle textures and strange, curling black tattoos I'd never seen before. If this was a person, I couldn't imagine how they lived to this day. Her toothless mouth was about to say something, but Ash suddenly rushed over, having also seen the creature. He snatched the flashlight and shone it on her. "How can you be Megan?" Megan was with me at the winery just now, but as the strong light hit her, she screamed and backed away into the darkness. It seemed too late. The black tattoos on her body began to glow, finally bursting into flames, burning alive before my eyes until she was nothing but ashes. I finally understood why she feared the flashlight light and why she could only hide here, unable to leave before the fire spread. Ash and I quickly protected Mrs. Matheson, led her out. In a moment, the bedroom became a blazing inferno. When the security guards arrived with fire equipment, all the renovations of the past years were completely destroyed. Ash looked at the fire, tilted his head and smiled. That's probably the problem with a mansion being too big. Let's go. The case is closed." "Closed? Where did you see that? Didn't you?" I hummed. Apparently this old Mrs. Beaumont knew some unclean sorcery, turning her daughter who wanted to elope into a monster and imprisoning her in the darkness for years. Margot was driven mad to the point where she didn't even know who she was, even saying she was Megan. Right? She probably wasn't in her right mind. So after her mother died, she snuck in at night and dragged her mother's body into the secret passage. I clicked my tongue. Your deduction is too far-fetched. According to you, the Beaumonts practice witchcraft, turning people into monsters and corpses. You're right, Mrs. Mathis, having arranged the fire safety, suddenly came over. Our family does have such a mysterious library. To be precise, it's already Margot's library. By our generation, only she likes to read these things. I think it's inseparable from our superstitious mother's influence. Our ancestors were like that. She pointed to the third floor of the mansion. If you want to investigate this aspect, you can go anytime. No need. Ash suddenly interrupted. We're close to the truth. We'll summarize the results and report to you soon. Just wait. She hummed again, patted my shoulder, and signaled me to drive back. However, I still couldn't understand or accept this conclusion. I still felt that Ash seemed greedy, completely unlike his former self, and there were many unknown things that we hadn't solved. 2 days later, I couldn't let it go, and I returned to the mansion. I told Ash to wait for me in the wine cellar. I'd be back soon. The fire was extinguished, and the mansion's renovation equipment had been removed, its magnificent original appearance restored. As soon as I entered, I asked the housekeeper to take me to Margot's library. I was sure there were many clues left there, but strangely, wasn't their housekeeper a woman? Where did that Aunt Megan go? Ignoring it, I began searching the tall bookshelves. There were indeed many books on witchcraft and sorcery from around the world, Eastern insect magic, European witchcraft, Native American curses, and some I'd never even seen. Even more shocking was that Margot had left a bookmark in almost every book, showing her obsession with these things. Suddenly, a book bound in animal skin caught my attention. The skin was very thick, the hair unprocessed, very clean, as if made from local materials by inhabitants of a cold region. The page marked by the bookmark clearly read, I.J. Iraq. Perhaps out of intuition, I began to read page by page. This near magical record opened. I.J. Iraq dwells beneath the nests of the dead. It can be a body or a wisp of breath. We followers understand how to summon it. The one who receives it peels the flesh and skin of another, dons them, and walk freely, like a rock, forever existing. A drop of sweat fell on the book, and I nervously continued. Those whose skin and flesh are taken, cursed by a rock above, may never see the sunlight, forever bound to darkness, serving as servants to us followers. I slammed the book shut, wiping the sweat from my face. What this heretical book described was too insane, yet it seemed to perfectly explain everything we had seen 2 nights before: the strange person in the secret passage, the human skin on the ground, the thing that spontaneously combusted in the strong light. Suddenly, a bizarre thought flashed through my mind. What if the culprit wasn't the old lady, but Margot herself? Like the voice I heard that day, Margot never left. She became a follower of this rock, living under another identity. We have the same interests. We both like strange, mysterious things, and we completely accept each other's physical flaws. I couldn't just not have left. I wanted to leave. I was locked up here by the old lady. Suddenly, I understood everything. I ran downstairs, found Ash, dragged him into the car, stepped on the gas, and drove toward Mrs. Mathis' company. Ash, in the passenger seat, was clearly startled by my actions. "What are you doing in such a hurry?" I explained as I drove. "Ash, I figured it out. Margot Beaumont is different from me. We may both have some childhood traumas, but I chose to escape. She chose to become the shadows. You understand?" "I don't understand," Ash replied helplessly. I was a little incoherent just now, and reorganized my words. Some people are different from us. They may be born purely evil, with an unfillable obsession with witchcraft and sorcery. In it, Margot is. I found a ritual used by followers in her library. It can peel off human skin and wear it like a mask. Do you remember the old lady's skin we saw in the passage? She was the first victim. Margot never left. She experimented on her mother first. She succeeded. She replaced her mother, for 25 years, as the head of the Beaumontes, running this huge business empire for 25 full years. Otherwise, why were Mathis and the others consistently prevented by their mother from searching for Margot? Because Margot was right in front of them. Ash was clearly stunned. I continued. The second victim was Megan. I don't know how many years she served this fake Mrs. Beaumont, but she didn't escape Margot's clutches. After Margot shed her mother's skin, she went after Megan. Of course, in her eyes, it was Mrs. Beaumont who did it, so she kept saying Mrs. Beaumont locked her up and begged her to spare her. Yes, the one we saw in the passage was Megan. Megan turned into a monster after being skinned. And the housekeeper who stopped you from entering the mansion was Margot. Once again changed. You know, it suddenly started raining, and I had to slow down. I suddenly heard Ash laugh. "Lainey, your guess is quite interesting, but how did you figure out who the victims were?" "Through smiles," I replied. Ash was clearly stunned. I continued to explain. "To be precise, it's a disease." I gave Ash all of Margot's old photos, saying I'd always felt that Margot's smiles in these photos were strange. She was either sullen in group photos or had a strange wry smile when playing around. "That's not a smile, Ash. It's actually a symptom of muscle spasms. When she's tense, she has these spasms. Only it looks like a wry smile. Only she and the Beaumont family had this disease, after her family mistook her for missing. Mrs. Beaumont wore a veil. Why? Was it just because she was afraid people would see her crying? Absolutely not. It's because that was Margot, wearing her mother's skin. Under the veil, she still had spasms. She was always wryly smiling." Ash was silent, and I didn't look at him sideways, continuing to watch the rainy road. "Ash, if you carefully recall, did you see that housekeeper, Megan, occasionally show an evil smirk? Like this. At that moment, I heard a sound, startled and turned to the passenger seat. At that moment, Ash's mouth twitched and rose, as if smirking triumphantly. City News Update, January 10, 2024, 2:27 p.m. A traffic accident occurred on Qingbei 3 Expressway. A white SUV plunged off a cliff. Ashmon Sent, sitting in the passenger seat, miraculously survived. The driver, Li Ni, mysteriously disappeared and is still being searched for. There have been recent heavy rains in the city. Please be careful when driving.